What's going on, guys? Today we're coming at you guys with a review. This is a review on The Last of Us TV show that just aired its first episode on Sunday. Little late, unfortunately. I have been under the weather for the last 2 days, and I was the one that was going to be doing this review. So we are getting right into this, though. Straight off the bat, this was a fantastic adaptation of the first, I'll say, initial opening and beginning of The Last of Us game into a TV series. Pedro Pascal is actually a fantastic casting for this. The individual person that did the original voice acting, Barker, he did a fantastic job. All of his lines were done perfectly, but he is a voice actor. He is focused on a voice actor. If you ever want to see him do an acting portrayal, he and I believe it was Ellen Page actually did a reenactment of a couple of scenes from The Last of Us. It was put together for a Comic-Con a couple of years back when The Last of Us was really getting its pull. So if you want to check that out, I highly recommend. But we're going to be going from the beginning to the end of this first episode. This is going to be an episode by episode review as they come out. And then at the very end, we're going to be doing a full altogether review of the entire series as a whole. I'm not certain what HBO Max wants to do with this, whether this be part 1 and part 2 exactly as the games are. I hope not. I feel like there was a lot of information that was spread from part 1 that we needed a little bit more for part 2, especially because of how part 2 goes, and I'm not going to give any spoilers on that. However, this is going to be a spoiler-filled review, so if you are apprehensive about that, I would click off, watch the show, come back here to get a gamer's thoughts and perspectives on this episode. First, right off the bat, stayed true to the timing. 2003 was when it started. I actually loved the 1968 sequence that was at the very beginning. Actually going in depth on kind of a backstory to how this fungi appeared and how it could have adapted to this world. It was something that the game probably did in more of the lore basis of finding like collectibles along the way. When I played the game, I was a little bit younger, so I didn't appreciate that kind of thing. However, in this, I really did appreciate that, especially since we're just coming out of the epidemic and everything, and well, pandemic, and we've been seeing like all this different stuff with infections and viruses. To have somebody be like, "Oh no, those won't even compare to the fungi," it almost kind of took a toll for a second of like, that's insane. Like, to think that a fungi could be more impactful than how COVID was to so many individuals. When it comes to casting, Pedro Pascal, fantastic. Bella Ramsey, she's starting off, and I'm not going to discredit her whatsoever. Being put into the shoes of Ellie is very hard, especially because the individual that voice acts her is an adult, could not play the live action version of her. The closest adaptation was Ellen Page, who now identifies as Elliot Page, so that wouldn't have come in congruency with the actual show, as well as the fact that they are much older than what age Ellie would be in this show. Gabriel Luna did great playing Tommy Miller. I'm very excited to see more from him. Tommy was one of my favorite characters through the whole game. Marlene and Tess, good castings for both of those. I know that there was I was reading the comments on a lot of different posts from this show, and a majority of them were, why is Sarah not white? Why is Sarah not white hair with blonde eyes, and with blonde hair and blue eyes? Like, why is this not? Why is this? Why'd they change the race? That is something that if you're getting hung up on that for this show, it's not necessary. The portrayal that Nico Parker did for Sarah Miller was fantastic. I liked how the show went more in depth to build her a little bit more. In the video game, we got some aspect of that. We saw the watch sequence. The watch sequence in the show was really well done. I appreciated them still keeping that in because the watch is such a focal point of the entire series for him. Having it, even though it's broken, is one of the main things with it. And it kind of also shows his tie and his humanity of trying to connect and stay connected to his past. because unfortunately he's now living in a world where his past was completely left behind. His daughter and his wife both are no longer in the picture, and he has to completely start anew in this wild world. So seeing how they did that was very fantastic. I'm never going to hate on Nico Parker because she did a fantastic job with what she was given. And I think having that in the background, having that be the understanding, didn't affect me whatsoever watching it. Although I played the game a while ago, it was not something that I was hung up on or very frustrated by. From the beginning to the end, this felt like the game. There were many aspects of this that were very, very similar in congruency to the actual video game. The car scenes, from the beginning scene, as I had said with the watch was a big one. And some things that they added, which I thought adding the grandma from next door was such an eerie addition. Having Sarah interact with that first was beyond uncomfortable. Like seeing her kind of walk through the house like there was something wrong, there was something definitely up, and then just to see them. Also, I was a little bit thrown off by how the zombies were infecting others. Or not zombies, but well, they're referred to as clickers, but that's something that they will get more into because of the sounds that they make and because it's not the actual zombies, they're fungi, so they refer to them as clickers. But the clickers were like putting the mushrooms through their mouth into open wounds. Interesting take to it. It kind of looked hokey. The first initial thing that I had written was the grandma thing was super creepy. She started shifting all over the place. Oh, yes. And during the DVDs portion, where Sarah was looking for DVDs for her and Joel to watch in the after, and you could see behind her, like the grandma just kind of spazzing out and then freaking out. That was really, really good. There was a couple of different lines in newscastings early on that were saying that they think this is a new drug, that there's a new drug to blame, and that's what's going on with it, which would also kind of push on this whole like mushroom type of epidemic type of thing. One thing that I did wonder was how old his daughter was. I think Nico Parker, probably because of her height and because Pedro Pascal's height, it looked like she was much older than how I would have envisioned Sarah to be. In my mind, Sarah was like 12 or 13. Maybe I'm getting it wrong just because of proportions and we didn't get to know much more about it. But she just seemed like she was older than she should have been. And if that's something that they did for it, it didn't affect me much, but it did throw me a little bit. I was kind of confused on that. The line in the scene where the watch was first given and Joel asked like, oh, well, how did you get this? And Sarah's like, oh, I deal hardcore drugs. That was one of my favorite lines from the game just because it was so parent, like, back and forth. Like, you could tell that these two had been through so much, probably with the loss of their mother as well as wife, that they've bonded onto such a emotional connection, and that helped in the game to humanize them, and it helped so much in the show to keep the humanization there. They did really good on building up the tension of the outbreak happening, from Sarah being asleep to waking up and then like hearing the planes and the helicopters go along, hearing the sirens, the explosions, everything along those lines was crazy. And the build up from the beginning of the day all the way through that opening sequence, the first probably 20 or 30 minutes, you can slowly see it building, but they're doing it in the background. And if you're not paying attention, you're not noticing it, which is almost more creepy to me because it's the same idea of like, would we notice it that much? Would we notice everything going around us if we weren't looking for something like that? This is where I kind of felt the grandma was kind of cheesy. It just threw me off a little bit. Her running out of the house, though, from the moment that she stepped out of the foot of that house and Joel and Tommy were out in the car, like screaming, and then you just see like both of them just whack this old lady, the fear kind of set in on Sarah's character. That changed the whole pacing. Like, that kind of kicked it off, and you're like, okay, this is where it gets super serious. And then from then on, the car scene was almost frame for frame. You've probably seen a lot of side-by-side comparisons from different accounts on all types of social medias. They did so well to this. And for the gamers, they switched it up on us. So it did throw it didn't throw me, but it did kind of like I was kind of freaked with it when they were first going into the center of that city and everyone was coming out and everyone's filling into the streets and they were backing up. In the game, the car hits them and that's what shakes them all up. So when I saw the car come, I was like, oh my gosh, but then it stopped and I was like, okay, so they changed that. Like, what else are they going to change from here on out? Then when it got to the point where they turned around, they saw the plane coming down. That was such a good choice for change. Adapting it to this new age was something so necessary, and that's definitely something that Neil Druckmann wanted to do on purpose, and I think that's the best part about it. Now, I will say the stranger situation, when they were passing the strangers, that was in the game, that was in the show, both were done very well. Tommy had that little bit of like, no, we should help them, and Joel was just in that father mentality of like, no, we don't know what's going on, we don't want to deal with it, leave them be, let it go. And again, it just shows the difference of these two characters. Tommy is a little bit more happy-go-lucky, a little bit more interactive with others, where Joel is more seated, more gated because of what he's dealt with and because of the loss that he's had. Sarah's death was good. I'm not going to say it was great. I preferred the game's perspective for this. I think just because of... I'm not certain. I'm really not certain. I just preferred the games. Both were done very well. It's just a personal preference for me. Sarah did really well, and seeing some of the behind the scenes that come out about her explaining part of her scene and how when they went up to the director was like, this is the most excruciating pain you've ever felt in your life. This is the hardest thing that you've ever felt, and it's the worst thing you've ever felt. And then saying the same thing to Pedro, and both of them going into that knowing, it showed. It really did show. I liked how they jumped to 2023 instead of 2033. I believe 2033 is when it actually did take place in the game, and I actually prefer them doing the 23 just because it connects us a little bit more, even though it's just a year, and even though the humanity that is there is so distant from the humanity that we have now, it still felt crazy to me to think like, okay, this was only 20 years later. Dropping the Firefly icons and logos every once in a while was really interesting. I thought it was crazy putting in the live hangings from the get-go. I don't remember that from the game. I don't know if that was in the game, but if it was, I'm shocked I forgot it. But that like threw me so much. It almost started to remind me more of like Homefront video games, which if you don't know the Homefront franchise is so good, but it's crazy. And it's based off of the Red Dawn, so that's what it's similar to. I thought the set design for Boston, at least QZ Boston, which is the quarantine zone Boston, was really well done. All the individuals looked like their clothes had been pieced together and thrifted. All the apartments looked mishmashed and hosh-posh because there isn't no production. There's no Art Vans and Garner Whites that are producing furniture. There's no Nike or anything like that that's putting out new clothing. This is what they have, and they are dealing with what they have, and so they are piecing together stuff as they can. The chemistry between Tess and Joel was pretty decent. Joel is very protective, which does add foreshadow for the remainder of the show. A lot of that has to do with what's going on. The handoff for Ellie, they changed a couple of things here and there. I can't remember that specifically from the game, but the scene where they first got back into the apartment and Joel like lays down and then just is like, oh, I'm gonna kill some time, and she's like, well, what am I supposed to do? That was pretty side-by-side comparison. Very well done. Them getting out of the quarantine zone was really, really good. I loved the recreation with that. It felt like I was building anxiety from it, just from how everything was moving, and they had foreshadowed with those hangings of those people actually being, they were the ones that got out of the QZ zone and got back in. So like, we knew what the stakes were for those individuals. We knew right where they were going to start. That was really well done. The parallel flashbacks of the soldier and his daughter with Ellie and the soldier was really good. it showed that Joel can snap, and that's a big thing in the games. Like in the games, it really does, like the father mentality is a blurred line for him in the video games. So having that involved was really well done. For the first episode, they did a solid job. I'm hoping and praying that they keep this type of recreation of the series almost scene for scene for a majority of it, because the game portrays such a fantastic essence of storytelling that there's not a lot that they need to switch up. Obviously, the games were more combat focused. It was more interesting to the individual who was playing it. It wouldn't be fun to watch some of those scenes in a show, if that makes sense. But I did see at the very end of the episode they show like what's to come. There was a lot of different factions, which made me very hopeful, because the factions were a big thing in the game, and I'm very excited for Bella Ramsey to come into Ellie a little bit more, kind of get out of her shell. I think right now we've seen so little of Ellie that we can't super hyper focus on her not being a good acting choice. She did good for what she was dealt, and I think that she is going to be a great addition to the cast. Pedro Pascal is doing a fantastic job as Joel. It makes me very excited for what this season holds, as well as next seasons and continuations. I'm hoping that this isn't Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2. I want to see more of this, and there's a lot of time jump that happens between The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2. So I would very much enjoy to see a lot more progression if this is going to be a series instead of a season. Other than that, that is my full review on episode 1 of The Last of Us. If you enjoyed this review, leave a like, subscribe, drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts in the comments of what you would have changed, what you did like, what you didn't like. We're always open to a discussion in the comments, especially about something like this that is a combination of the cinema world combined with the video game world. We love different adaptations, and this is one that is so close. It gives me hope for some of the new series coming forward, especially ones like Warhammer, Gears of War, similar things like that. Thank you all for watching. If you tune in next week, this will be posted probably on a Wednesday. The next review will be posted on the Monday, just after. So catch us back for that. Keep watching. Thank you so much.